Krypton's core is collapsing. We may only have a matter of weeks. I warned you. Look to the stars, like our ancestors did. There are habitable worlds within reach. There's still hope.
Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Kryptonian Collection, the show where each month our venerated Council of El will gather to discuss, argue, and finally vote on whether a movie should be granted entrance into the illustrious Kryptonian Collection, a list of the greatest films our meager little planet has to offer. My name is Scott Daly, your host and permanent member of the Council. Joining me today is my co-host and fellow permanent Council member, Matt Freeman. Matt, episode 10, this is it. This is your moment.
That's right, Scott, but we'll get into all that in just a second. First, let's talk to our guests. Our current temporary council member who earned his seat after successfully lobbying for 12 monkeys last month, Michael.
Victory's mine.
Yes,
Hello.
we're all very proud of you, Michael.
Yes, we are.
I've chosen the best movie, but then I was one up this week. Spoilers.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
I don't know if that counts as spoilers.
Yeah, well,
Foreshadowing again.
Foreshadowing, yeah. And also returning once again to the show is Daniel Freeman.
This is going to be like a Jimmy Kimmel, Matt Damon thing where every time you bring me on, it's one of my favorite movies. And therefore, I will never actually be able to get onto the council. But hello, everyone.
Yeah, that's true. But you were on, though. I mean, it was an honorary title, but you were there.
That's true.
Crappy movie.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for both of you coming back. Let's just get right into this. Matt, I'm going to drop a beat, and you drop those rules. Ready?
All right.
So I'm just going to...
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Jesus. Guys, I'm not good at rap. I'm not good
Higher
at rap.
values last time I was on.
Each month, the council will convene to consider the entry of another film into the collection. A challenger will put forth his movie for nomination and an argument for including it. The council and our challenger will then discuss the film in detail, including its merits and any flaws. Once this discussion is complete, a vote will be taken. Each of the three members of the council gets one vote, and if the film receives at least 2 yes votes, it is entered into the collection. At this point, the challenger would also be awarded with the 3rd seat on the council, kicking Michael off and taking his place. The challenger would then join us next month and get a deciding vote in that month's film. If, however, the film does not get the required 2 votes, it is rejected and forever banned from consideration. The challenger, of course, is welcome to come back in a few months' time to put forth a different film for consideration. And speaking of that challenger, who appears before the council this month?
Well, Matt, this month we have... Wait, it's you?
Yes, because we have a hidden rule that every 5 episodes, you, Scott, or I may choose to temporarily step away from our spot on the council and assume the role of challenger. We don't, get the vote when we do this, but we may nominate a former member to take our spot for the month. And I have graciously ceded my spot to Daniel.
Wow. Daniel, with one more shot at glory here.
Yeah. Now, just to be clear, there's no chance of you taking the actual seat on the council.
That's very true. It's just an honorary title granted to you for your loyal service.
I appreciate the honorary title. If it was ever so brief.
All right, Matt. As challenger, what film have you brought before our council this month?
I have chosen In Bruges.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about In Bruges and then a little bit why you picked it?
All right. Well, the IMDb summary for this film is: guilt-stricken after a job gone wrong, hitman Ray and his partner await orders from their ruthless boss in Bruges, Belgium, the last place in the world Ray wants to be. Which sounds dour and depressing and not at all like a comedy, which is what this movie is. So what I want to talk about this movie to open it up is I want to talk about tone, because I think this movie is a tonal masterpiece, and there's really nothing quite like it in terms of the tone that it has and the fact that every single element of the film is precisely calculated to reinforce that tone. And what that tone is essentially is a dark comic tone, but it's also much more than that. Because like if you just look at that movie, that summary, it's pretty horrific, right? Like if you look at the actual plot summary, it's kind of terrible things are happening. It doesn't sound fun at all, but actually it's a really funny movie while also doing justice to the things that are happening on a dramatic and a thematic level. And as for why I picked this movie specifically, in addition to just loving it, is that I think this movie was important to me artistically, because when I first saw it, I was in a place in my writing where things just weren't working. Nothing ever felt right. I was really sort of struggling, and just seeing this movie made me get it. Like, it made me realize the importance of tone being actually a central choice in storytelling, not just kind of a side effect of the plot, which is how I had been thinking of it prior to watching this movie. And I really want to talk about the themes of this film as well. But before we get into that, which I'm sure we will, I'd love to hear you guys give your thoughts first.
Yeah, sure. So we're just going to go briefly around the council table and say if we had seen this film before this, and generally high level what we thought of it. So Daniel, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yeah, sure. So like I hinted earlier, this is one of my favorite films of all time. I think this film single-handedly rehabilitated Colin Farrell's acting chops in my mind. I think the film I saw before this was like when he was the villain in the Daredevil movie, the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. He was an action hero for like many years, and then he did this, and I'm like, wait, he can act? Like, everyone in this movie is a ridiculously good actor, and like I just really like this movie, and that is my impression.
All right, Michael, how about you?
Yeah, this is literally the best movie that was ever made. I think. And I would have chosen it had I remembered its existence last month. Not that I'm not happy with my 12 Monkeys pick, but yeah, the acting is great. The tone is great. This is like a movie that is, like, with the music selection and everything, I feel like it's kind of an allegory for like depression. But unlike most movies which are about depression, this movie doesn't make me depressed, but gives me hope and meaning.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting considering the ending, but let's maybe save the spoilers for a bit later, but we'll definitely get the spoilers.
Yeah. I'm kind of right there with you guys. I don't remember when I saw this. I don't think I saw this with you guys, because this was February of 2008 this came out. So I think I was on my fifth year in school.
I don't even think I saw it in theaters.
I definitely did not. So I came to this one late. I think I actually saw Seven Psychopaths, his second film, before I saw this one, to be honest with you, which didn't come out till 2012. I really love this movie. I think the drama behind this week's episode of Kryptonian Collection is not going to be, will this movie get in? Because I think it's painfully obvious that all of us really love this movie. I think it's just going to be a great conversation where we get to dive into exactly why this movie works so well and what is great about it. Martin McDonagh is kind of a fascinating director to me because he was a playwright for a very long time, and this was his first feature film. I think he directed a short before this that won an Oscar because he's just that fucking good. And it's so well done on every single level. Like, I think you guys hit on the acting, the writing is fantastic, but how he shoots the city and how he uses the city and the shots of this beautiful but old looking city to drive home his themes, I think is just incredible. And it's so well done, and I can't wait to dive into this with all of you. So let's do that now. Let's go ahead and get into the details of this thing. And Matt, you said you want to talk about the theme, so I think that's a really great place to start.
Yeah, sure. So this movie is unusual in that I think it tackles a lot of themes. We've I guess Michael kind of mentioned the idea that this is about depression, and I like that. I don't know if I've ever had that thought exactly before, but you've got this character who he opens up the movie basically making a horrible mistake that kind of breaks him and drives him to become suicidal. And throughout the movie, there are repeated motifs of heaven and hell and justice and punishment and sin and guilt. I think guilt is one of the major ones, but all of those words I just said in a jumble are sort of smashed together into kind of a larger theme that you could call guilt and how people struggle with guilt, because he has such guilt from this thing that he's suicidal. They're looking at these like paintings of what hell looks like and having sort of philosophical discussions, now and then with each other, and you trace his relationship with that guilt over the course of the movie, and different characters have different philosophies about how guilt needs to be managed. Like, for example, his partner wants to forgive him, and his boss, you could even say, represents a certain Old Testament mentality of like no, there's no compromise with things like this. He needs to die. Let me stop talking now, but yeah, like that's one stab at addressing some of the themes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way to look at this is that Bruges itself represents purgatory, where both these guys have committed sins and are waiting for their final judgment. And I think I was looking up because I wanted to know the name of the painting, that the only one that Ray liked in the whole museum was a painting called The Final Judgment, which is pretty thinly veiled metaphor there. But they exist in this world where they're kind of waiting and trying to deal with their sins and waiting for what happens next. And I think it's this and we kind of hinted this, but the way the city goes in to express that kind of waiting for judgment mentality is really fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, like he can't stand to be in the city. I think that's so much of the humor comes from this idea that he hates being in the city, and his partner loves it. I don't know. It's continually hilarious.
Yeah. Well, and there's this idea of if Bruges represents purgatory, then like you have the Ken character, who's Brendan Gleeson, his partner, who is kind of like dealt with the person he is, and he's dealt with who he is and the things that he's done, and he is comfortable and ready for whatever that judgment is, whereas Colin Farrell's character is like terrified and guilty and worried and depressed and all these different emotions, and like terrified of what's going to happen next, how he's going to be able to go on.
Yeah, you're right, and that through line continues throughout, because at the very end, his judgment comes for him, and he sets aside his gun, and he's like, I accept whatever it is you want to do to me, to his old friend, the mob boss.
Yeah.
And is just very peaceful about the whole thing. Whereas Ray runs frantically for the whole, last 10 minutes of the movie, just desperate to live. And even at the very end, he's desperate to live.
Yeah. Runs right into a movie shoot that just so happens to look exactly like the Final Judgment painting that he was looking at in, and then having his final sin represented in the little person standing right in front of him. Like, it's just, the imagery is beautiful and wonderful. Anyway,
I totally did not catch that at all.
Well, there you go. You learned something new.
Yeah, I love Ray Fiennes' character.
Yeah. He's and it's so funny because he comes so late to the movie. Like, we hear his voice for 2/3 of the movie, and we don't see him, and then suddenly he becomes a real character. Almost as if he like you hinted towards it, but it's almost as if he is God coming here to finally lay upon the final judgment on them.
Yeah.
Every
really
single
terrible.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Michael.
I was just saying, every single character in this movie, I like that this movie didn't have very many characters, but every single one is a great character and very purposefully introduced. Because really the only characters are Ray and his buddy and the mob boss, and then the owner of the inn and the girl who Ray is courting, and the little person.
Yuri.
Sorry?
Yuri also.
And Yuri
with the outcoats.
It was just
The outcomes.
just hilarious.
Secondary character, but each of the characters is used to their full. Like, none of them are just like someone who was just there because they needed someone to interact with.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like, I'm noticing even in this conversation how economical everything is, because like you've got the skinhead who Ray shoots the blank in his eyeball and like blinds him in one eye, and then he's whining, and Ray Fiennes is there, and has absolutely no pity for him, and he's like, you were being a punk and stupid, and you got shot in the eye for being stupid, and now you're blind. And it basically just has no sympathy for him, and it just completely encapsulates his mentality about like getting what you deserve and accepting it, which is what he's trying to do here, and actually how his character concludes beautifully.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense with what you said, Scott, about the director having done plays before this, because that's exactly what you do in a play. You would have a very tight cast where everyone is significant and comes up a couple of times.
Yeah, part of me wonders if he wrote this as a play originally and then said, no, I want to make this a movie instead, because I think it would work. There's not anything to the setting specifically besides, like, I mean, there is definitely something to the setting. The setting is very important, but you could do it on a stage and most of the themes would come through still.
Yeah, I think the only hard, like every scene in this movie is just like a conversation, except for the one gunfight, which isn't even really a gunfight. It's just kind of like a frantic run through the city, which you could probably do with a stage play anyway.
And then they stop to have a conversation between stairs where the owner of the hotel calls them crazy people.
Right.
Yeah. Who is, of course, pregnant for symbolic reasons.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, he loses his gun fairly quickly, so it isn't a gunfight at all. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about I guess the performances. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but like this is, I think, my favorite Colin Farrell performance of all time. Not only is he like just really like he reads the lines wonderfully, but like there's like like manicness to him, like a constant twitchiness. Like a lot of times, like they're in Bruges in Christmas time, so it's very cold, but he's like, even when he's inside, he's like constantly shivering. Like what he does with his eyes, he makes his eyes constantly dart around. There's just like you can tell this thing is eating him up, and he can't sit still. Like he has to keep going, because if he ever stops for a minute, all this stuff comes back to him. And it's just a wonderful performance.
Yeah, he does a good job of going between like trying to distract himself, like initially being really excited about asking the girl out, but then like later being like, what does it matter anyway? And being really depressed about it. And when he's like really moody, like when he goes to the church with his friend and he like shuffles up like a child, like, making things with his feet.
Do I have to go see the blood of Jesus? Of course you don't have to.
It's only the blood of, yeah. I always imagine, always like the cover, the movie jacket cover picture of him like in the trench coat with like his shoulders all hunched up and this miserable expression on his face. It's like there's two Colin Farrells. There's normal Colin Farrell like in Minority Report and every other movie, and then there's this Colin Farrell in only this movie that I'm aware of. And it's if this movie didn't exist, I don't think I'd have a very high opinion of him actually.
Yeah. Well, and it, like I just love like when he sees the little person, and just like you're exactly right, Michael. He like goes back into kid mode and he like says they're filming midgets. And then he like sprints off to see it. And it's like it's almost, and I don't want to read too much into it, but he killed a child, and it's almost as like he's like transforming into a child himself as a way to not deal with it or something. But yeah, he the fact that he can flit back and forth between these two extremes, where on the one hand, he's like running around and eager and ridiculous. And on the other hand, he's like depressed sitting on a park bench about to put a gun to his head. And both sides of that spectrum are completely believable. That goes into the tone, which I think we're going to get to in a bit. But Farrell's performance is so key to that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good. It's one of the best portrayals of like a depressed person, because they're not just like constantly sullen. There's like a lot of the stuff that's going on is internal, and him trying to fight with it.
Yeah. And so before we move on, let's talk about Gleason a bit too, because I think he's just as wonderful, and he has to carry kind of the other half of this movie, where he has to be this, like, whereas Ray is excited in the childish kind of way, Ken is excited in an adult kind of way. He is like just enjoying his time, but there's something hanging over it. Like he knows what Ray has done, and you get the feeling that Ken knows what's coming. He knows that he's eventually going to like something is eventually going to happen to Ray. I don't think he was prepared for him having to be the one to do it, But you get the feeling that he is much more aware of the situation and what's going to happen, and is just kind of trying to enjoy himself while he can.
Yeah, particularly like the phone call with Ray Fiennes. I think that was one continuous shot.
It was
that entire conversation, and it's just like a masterpiece of like watching his face like during the conversation, because like you can tell that he knows that it's just being drawn out by Ray Fiennes talking about like nonsense and about how it's like a fairy tale kingdom from his childhood, and it's it's
I think that scene itself is a good encapsulation of this movie as a whole. You're right, because on the one hand you have this totally depressing news about this character that you've now come to like. On the other hand, the scene is hilarious because he's lying about the fact that Ray isn't there, and Ray Fiennes is making him go through this really complicated thing of like, okay, send him out of the room, so he has to like have a fake conversation with him and then open the door for him, and he's like, okay, he's gone. Well, he might be at the door still. So he has to then walk to the door and pretend to check on him. And it's just like this really like drawn out, complicated thing mixed in with the news that, hey, you're going to have to kill him. I just sent him to Bruges because I liked Bruges and wanted to give him a final farewell or a final goodbye. And it's just, I don't know, like that scene is really wonderful. And
one of the great about that scene and the humor in this movie in general is that like that scene, when you kind of describe it, it sounds like a comic bit. But it doesn't come off like that at all in the movie. Like it just ends up making all of the characters seem a lot more human. And you just care about things more. It doesn't like take you out of it in a sort of like comic cartoon, like a lot of comedies end up having seen before.
The comedy ends up being more like absurdism than jokes. I mean, there's a few laughs. There's definitely a few laughs in there, but a lot of the humor is just. And it's not absurdity for absurdity's sake. I think, like you said, it's absurdity as a mechanism for looking into humanity.
It doesn't usually call out the absurdity. Like one of the scenes that I thought were one of the choices I thought that were the worst in the movie is when they were having that when Ray Fiennes and Colin Farrell were having that conversation down the stairs, and then the innkeeper like says out loud, "You guys are crazy." Like I almost wish that line wasn't there, because they don't usually point out that any of the things that they're doing are ridiculous. Like you totally like buy into this kind of like world as they see it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, that the world itself usually does not acknowledge how ridiculous it's being. And that's really one of the only moments that it is.
Yeah. I wanted to just briefly go back to that moment where Ken is told that he's going to have to kill him, and it's just such the acting on display when he kind of goes from being his like calm and always kind of like interested in appreciating the beauty of the city and sort of outwardly focused and pleasant person, and then he knows he's going to have to kill this friend, and his whole demeanor and like character changes, and he's just like so sad about this, but he knows he's going to have to do it, and he's stealing himself up for it, and he goes in, he gets the gun, and he's so like upset, and he's just mumbling through the conversation, hardly acting like himself anymore, and then he finally goes to do it, and he's about to do it, and then of course Ray puts the gun to his head and he stops him, and then he goes back to being his real, the character who because like that's his humanity came out and it stopped him, and then he's from that point on for the rest of the movie he's true to himself, and I don't know, I felt like that was a fantastic, just some of my favorite acting ever.
No, you're absolutely right.
All of the characters always act like exactly how they would if they were humans, and not like they would do if it was scripted so that certain things would happen, even though the movie like is scripted out perfectly to tell like the best narrative. That's not forced at all. Everything is completely natural.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, because like the first thing we see Gleason doing after he's gotten this news is he's down at the bar, like downing a beer. Like throughout the movie until this time, it's been Ray that's always wanted to go get drunk. It's been Ray that's always wanted to go party. And Ken has been, no, let's like do what we were told to do. Let's enjoy the city. Let's not get pissed. Let's like just relax. and then he's downing a beer. We hear that's his fourth in 20 minutes. And then he goes with Ray to do ecstasy and coke and all this shit. And from that moment on, he's a different character. And you're absolutely right, Matt, that he switches back to being in this, like, in command, like, knows what he needs to do and how to do it person. As soon as his humanity zaps back to him when he sees that gun go to Ray's head.
Yeah.
And I like, one of the things that I really wanted to talk about that I like, we talked about how good the writing is in this movie, and I think part of that is just how every joke is set up like in a very wonderful way. It's kind of like Edgar Wrighty a little bit in that like, every funny moment almost is set up kind of in some other, like, we have the whole conversation about how the only person that Gleason killed who was innocent was defending his brother, but he came at him with a bottle, and you got to kill a person with a bottle. Right. And then, like, the next scene, like, the wife of the Canadian that he got in a fight with comes at him with a bottle, and it's just this moment of a bottle, and then he just decks her in the face, and it's hilarious because it would be funny on its own, but it's even more funny because we have in the back of our mind that whole conversation about what you have to do when someone comes at you with a bottle.
Yeah, and just another example is like the church tower, windy stairs up to the church tower. We have a whole joke bit about the fat Americans can't go up the stairs because they're long, windy stairs. They're hard to get up and down. Is that going to be relevant later?
A little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's like super playwrighty, I think, because in a movie you just film the tower, but in narratively they've really clarified in your mind, like, oh, it's a long, it would probably be, I imagine it would be a long, hard climb to get back to the top of that tower if you were, for example, shot.
Yeah. So many super purposeful things, like even just like where the guns end up being placed at the end, all the guns that are existing, and obviously the last scene mirroring the initial bit with the child. Yeah.
Well, like the fact that he still has all the coins in his pocket because the guy was a dick. So like, when he jumps, he like clears the area by dropping the coins first before he jumps. Like every moment in this was set up in some way or another. And sometimes it does it to subvert expectations too, because there's two beats throughout the movie where Ken talks about how the top of the tower would be like a great vantage point for someone to shoot people from. And then finally, when he gets to the top of the tower after he's dragged himself up there to help Ray by getting on the top tower and shooting someone, it's cloudy. He can't see. So like that, we think we're being set up for something there, and then it subverts it.
There's also the bit where he climbs the tower initially and he makes the little hand gesture at Ray and the shooting noise.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was the setup for that whole thing. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so it's like,
I mean, at that point, you don't even really know if he's like, you don't even really know what's going on at that point. Actually, you're kind of just like, well, something terrible happened. They're here. He's making like a playful gunshot at his partner. Is this foreshadowing? Is this and it's kind of disconcerting, but it works so well.
Well, that's something we didn't really talk about. The fact that what he did, that he accidentally killed this kid, is not revealed to us until really the end of the first act. It's not held from us from the whole movie, but the entire beginning of the movie, we know he's done something bad. We know they're here to hide out because something went wrong and they killed someone, but we don't know the full extent of it until that one moment. And I think that helps, like, you see who the characters are before you really understand what they're going through. And I think that's a smart way of doing it.
Yeah. You wouldn't care as much if they'd opened with it.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that scene though, like the thing that kills me every time, that is like the funniest bit of the whole movie, is when it's when the kid dies, but when they show the note and like he came to like pray for forgiveness for being bad at maths.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I was reading Roger Ebert's review, and he mentioned that scene in particular, and he said, well, you see this blood-stained note of his confessions, which are basically like nothing. It's like, stop being mean, being bad at maths. I think one of them is like grumpiness or something, like he's grumpy.
Yeah, definitely.
And so like it's this moment you don't know whether you're supposed to laugh or cry at this, because it's both hilarious and awful. And the fact that the movie can skirt that, like, I think it's easy to throw out the term black comedy and just throw that out as like, oh, it's a movie that's dark but funny. But this is so much more than just a black comedy to me.
Yeah. And that's to completely loop back around. Like that's that's why this was so affecting to me the first time I saw it. Is I was like, this movie does not work at all unless you were absolutely riding that razor edge of getting that tone exactly right at every single opportunity. Where you're oh, he just smashed a woman in the face with a bottle, and I'm kind of laughing at that while also recognizing that that's horribly violent, and just stuff like that keeps happening throughout.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason it works is it works thematically too, as like the violence and responsibility for it kind of level.
Yeah, well,
yeah, because I mean, it would be so easy to make this movie having all of these kind of terrible people and have them not really be likable characters, but it actually manages to make you care about all of these horrible people who have sinned so much and are just desperately trying to repent in their own ways, but like it just works.
Can we talk? Yes. Can we talk about the Brendan Gleeson scene where he's like right after they've gone to the thing and Ray is asking Ken about if he believes in heaven and hell and all that stuff, and Ken's response to Brendan Gleeson's is like, well, I've tried to be a good person. Like if I saw a woman like carrying her bags, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to help her, but I'd maybe like open the door for her. But also I have to reckon with the fact that I've killed people. It's just like, what?
Yeah. I mean,
doesn't he like trail off at the end?
Yeah, basically.
It totally makes sense though. Like,
and that's how people really think about these things. Like the most like serious and mature and sober moment in the whole thing, I think, is after like the whole movie up to that point, Ray has been dodging thinking about this or admitting it, and they're sitting on the bench together, and he says something like, that little boy will always have died, and I will always have killed him, and nothing can change that. And that's what guilt is, and humans do everything they can to avoid that kind of admission because it's so painful and it doesn't go away. That's why people go to religion, is they can get some forgiveness, because otherwise you just have to sit with that like horror like every moment of every day, which that's what he's dealing with. That's why he's crawling out of his skin for the whole movie, is he can't stand to live with himself. Like isn't there a scene where he can't even look at himself in the mirror, like literally?
Yeah.
Well, when he's getting ready for the date.
Yeah. And like there's so much of that in this movie, and it's like the fact that Ray is such a funny comical character. Like on the one hand, we have he gets in the fight at the restaurant with those people, and because he's American, he starts talking about Vietnam, and it's just this nonsense like comparison where the actor literally calls him out of it. I was like, what do you mean the Vietnamese? What does the Vietnamese have to do with any of this? But on the other hand, you have a scene where he's about to go on the train, and Ken's trying to say like, just like keep moving for like 6 or 7 years. 6 or 7 years isn't that long. And Ray's response is, it's longer than that little boy got. And like how you can have these two things in the same movie and they're both believable and they're both enjoyable and they both work is remarkable.
Yeah. I forget who just said this, but one of you said something about like how it would be easy to not like these characters. And I think it's the fact that there's so much like positive humanity wound up in them. Like I think what almost makes the movie for me, like I sometimes think the movie would be different for me if this moment wasn't in there, is that as Ray Fiennes is about to shoot himself in the head because he believes that he just killed a child incorrectly, Ray clearly is trying to stop him and tell him, no, it wasn't a child, but like he's too shot up to be able to speak correctly.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And even this guy who just killed him, basically, he's trying to save his life.
Yeah, that's kind of like Ray's final judgment, right? Is that in this moment, the guy that killed him, he's dying. He tries to save his life. And I think that is the completion of Ray's arc, that he's like finally like trying and not running, and like, I'm going to try to help you just for the sake of helping you.
Yeah.
And the ending is kind of ambiguous there. Like he says at the end there that he doesn't want to die. But we don't, I mean, the movie does not say whether or not he is dead or not.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that's important to the plot, though. Or to the theme, I guess. That this is one of those Inception things. Where
it's not important. No. But I like that. I like that it's left ambiguous.
Yeah, I agree. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, because really, if you're taking the metaphor seriously, that Bruges is purgatory, it's like, okay, well, does he get to go to heaven or hell? And you don't, the movie ends without you knowing on any level.
Stays in Bruges forever.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing is like Bruges could be purgatory, but for Ray, Bruges could be hell, but for Ken, Bruges could be heaven. And I think that's very interesting that like a place or a state of mind or a existence can be different for each person that's in it.
Yeah, and I like how seems like Ken changed his mind about Bruges a couple times. Like he loves it, and then it seems like in the conversation he has with Ray when Ray's leaving on the train that he kind of agrees with Ray that he kind of hates the city now because of all the stuff that's happened there. But then right before he dies, when he's in the clock tower, with Ray Fiennes' character, then he like realizes again that this is really great. Like after he's sort of resigned himself to whatever his fate is.
Yeah. It's we haven't even touched on the fact that the thing that Ray hates the most about Bruges is that it's steeped in history, and he hates history because it's already happened. What can we do about it? Which of course reflects his guilt and his refusal right. to deal with his past at all. And it's like all these things are here, and it's not super subtle, but it's not like the movie doesn't beat you over the head with it either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly at a stage of the movie where you don't really know what's going on yet. He's just he's just grumpy about being in the place, and he doesn't like history, and he just wants to get on with it. But it's like, yeah, very, very obvious foreshadowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's actually, I was watching all the deleted scenes this afternoon.
Oh, they're so good. So good.
So, like some of them I can understand why they cut them. Some of the flashback stuff, like there's this whole flashback where you see Harry like walk into a police station and chop a guy's head off because he hurt Ken's girlfriend or something, which I think was meant to establish how important their friendship and relationship was. But I understand why that was taken out. But there's a scene where Colin Farrell, sees a teddy bear sitting on a park bench and like goes to sit next to the teddy bear, and he touches it and its head falls off into the canal. and like you just see Colin Farrell go from like happiness being around this teddy bear to just like full on depression. Like, oh my God, this is terrible in that moment. I wish that had kind of been left in the movie.
Sounds great.
Too on the nose, perhaps.
Yeah.
There's also like really good outtakes where Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell are just hilarious. And there's also no outtakes with Ray Fiennes, which makes me just think he's like a super serious like actor that has no sense of humor whatsoever. But yeah, they're really great.
But Ray Fiennes is so funny though.
I know, which is surprising. It's like
I
don't understand.
I appreciate the editing. Like, even though there might have been some really good scenes that they cut, like the fact that this movie was only an hour and a half, which is a good length for a movie, like showed a little bit of discipline, and it really paid off because every scene was so key. There's no bit of this movie that drags or wasn't important to the story. And I think a lot of movies these days aren't as good at doing that because they're like, yeah, people will sit through 2.5 hour movies. It's fine. I don't want to throw away these scenes that I filmed.
I agree. I think the movie does not overstay its welcome at all.
It is interesting that we don't consider scenes of people looking at old churches to be dragging, but it's actually pretty delightful throughout. Yeah.
Well, because I mean, every single one of them is doing something into defining these characters and their mindset and what they're going through. Like even the one like the Jesus's blood part is perfect. Like that scene. You look, everything you need to know about the characters is in that one scene. They came to this arrangement. Like Ray is being a jerk about it. And he's like, did we not say if you go on your date tonight, we get to do what I want to do today? He goes, yeah, we're doing what you want to do. Well, we stop being such a pill about it. It's like, well, we didn't agree to that part. And it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah. And I like how all of these jokes, there's not like playful music going on in the background. It's the same kind of like sad flute music
Oh yeah.
that is during the jokes that also play during the more serious bits of the movie.
Yeah, actually, that's like, I wanted to talk about the intro a little bit because we open up on like pictures of Gothic statues or religious Gothic statues looking sad and images of Bruges and this really moody piano and string music playing over it. That's like this really sad, dour thing. And then suddenly Colin Farrell's voiceover comes in and finishes it with a joke where it's basically like, I don't even know where the fuck Bruges is. And then there's this overly long pause and he says, it's in Belgium. And that's all being played over this super dour music with statues of babies crying on it. And it's a perfect representation of this film because you have this dour, depressing story with really funny beats laid on top of it.
Yeah.
The Belgium thing is continued later too when they're discussing Harry and Ken are discussing it on top of the bell tower.
Yeah.
It's like, it's famous in Belgium. Yeah, but if it was anywhere good, then it'd be too crowded. Something like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's a beat that's continued throughout, right? Because like Colin Farrell's talking about like how he grew up in Dublin. If he grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, maybe Bruges would be impressive, but he didn't.
Yeah. So it doesn't. Yeah.
It's so good. It's so
I kind of don't want to stop talking about this movie without like talking about the tone, the appropriate amount, even though we already talked about it. But like I think Michael remembers when I saw this movie or when we saw this movie, because I probably became really insufferable talking about like, I think we need to focus more on the tone of what we're writing. I think tone is really the thing that we need to put first and foremost in all of our writings from now on. And
it was a really good film, though. This is a great example for that.
Yeah, because it's like this movie would not work if it were an inch more dour or an inch more funny. I mean, it would probably still work in the sense that it would be an enjoyable movie, but if it were just a comedy.
Yeah, I don't understand why this movie isn't more praised.
I mean, I think it generally is. It's just, it was a smaller movie that didn't get a very wide release. So,
yeah. Did Daniel want to talk about the trailer?
Yeah, Daniel, let's talk about the trailer.
Yeah. So I think maybe the reason it isn't as widely considered as successful, or I think it is, but like the trailer is hilariously bad, in that it's not really about the movie that we're watching. Like I encourage everyone, like we should include a link to the trailer to
we'll put it in the show
it,
notes. Yeah,
because it's like it's selling it like kind of like an action movie, sort of, but also like a comedy action movie, like a dark,
like a Lethal Weapon, right?
Yeah, like essentially like a Lethal Weapon, and they just like some of the things that they cut. Some of the lines that they use in the trailer are just completely out of context to try and sell this action narrative. Just does not exist. Like, I really wonder if their production department was just like, if the director had no say whatsoever in how it was marketed, because it's clearly not the sort of message he was trying to sell. It has completely the wrong tone. And I remember actually seeing this before I saw the movie and just being like really confused when I started seeing the movie, because it's just completely different.
But, if you think about it, it's really hard to make a trailer for this movie that actually captures the tone, right? Because like no little clip of a scene is going to mean anything.
Yeah.
Everything that has meaning is kind of drawn out and connected together.
So I was about to say I agree with you, Michael, or I was about to voice a similar sentiment, but then I thought about for some random reason I've been seeing a trailer for The Lobster on my Facebook feed, and it's a really good trailer for The Lobster, and The Lobster is a really weird movie. So I agree that it's probably really hard to make it, but like I think it would have been possible. I think they just either didn't try, or their marketing department was like, no, that's not going to fly. Nobody wants to see that shit. Let's just make it. Right. Just make it look like an action movie.
Yeah.
The production company hired some, trailer making company to do it, so this wasn't, I'm sure, anywhere. The director,
but usually the trailer has something to do with the story or the message you're trying to communicate.
Sometimes,
or
yeah.
anything at all to do with the plot.
Are you
And
telling me that
this-
the movie's
this is
not
like-
about shooting first and sightseeing later?
But it's more about just like generating interest. And someone made a stupid marketing decision about like what kind of movie would generate interest.
Yeah,
I mean, it's probably because he was an action hero before this, and it's like, come see another Colin Farrell action movie thing.
Actually, it's been a long time since I saw the trailer we're talking about, but if anything, I think they're probably going for like a Guy Ritchie vibe, because it's like, they're sort of British. It's a movie in Europe and and guns and Colin Farrell. So yeah, you Americans know who Guy Ritchie is, and you've seen those movies. This is kind of like that.
Yeah, I bet you're right. Did you know that I read that they originally wrote these characters as English, and then Gleason and Farrell came and read for the roles, and they liked them so much they rewrote them as Irish, which I think is pretty great.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can we talk about how there's a scary number of people in this movie that are also in the Harry Potter series? There's like 5.
Yeah.
There's like 5.
Are there?
Yeah, Ralph Fiennes, Brendan
Yeah.
Gleeson, Colin Farrell, the girl that played Chloe, played Fleur de Leclerc in Harry Potter, and then the priest that he kills at the beginning was played someone.
Yeah.
Who? Okay, now I almost don't want you to tell me, because it's going to seem really obvious, but I can't remember who Colin Farrell plays in Harry Potter.
Oh well, he's in he's in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them movie.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that
So
yet.
that doesn't really count, but
Still though.
yeah.
Because there aren't that many British actors.
Because if you're a British or the United Kingdom or Ireland actor, then you have to be in Harry Potter.
There's
Yeah.
only like 10 British actors, right?
Yeah.
I'm bound to hit some of them.
All right. Does anyone have anything else they want to make sure we get in about this film? I think we've talked about it a lot and how wonderful it is. I think like the weird part about talking about a comedy movie is it can easily just like devolve into you just rereading the funny lines from the movie, which I know we did some of, but I don't want to just constantly do that. But like the movie is so funny. Like it's really hilarious at times. Like, and it's hard to fully explain that without just saying, here's a funny joke from the movie. But
they're not really throwaway jokes for the most part. They're all really context related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although there are like a lot of just like hilariously un-PC lines that are funny just because they're so offensive.
Yeah.
That are pretty throwaway.
Right. I didn't remember how much that it was. Like every single character is kind of really racist, and
Yeah, well, you have the little
not at all.
person's entire speech about the war of black people versus white people, which like at first you think is him just talking about race relations, but then devolves into him just being a full-on racist asshole, and it's really great.
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure that's just there so we don't feel bad about him dying. I never quite. If I had any complaint about the movie, it would be that I don't quite understand the point of that particular scene.
There's this undercurrent of all of them being kind of terrible people, and I thought it was just kind of more of that, but then they kind of used that scene to show that Brendan Gleeson isn't that terrible person. So I'm not sure what they were trying to communicate with.
You could extrapolate his black and white talk about away from just like races to literally like thinking of morality as a black and white thing, and how like Ray and Harry kind of exist in this gray between it, where they've both done terrible things, but Ken really wants Ray to survive and find a way through this, whereas Harry exists in that black and white. I mean, you could somersault with it if you wanted to create it into something. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's what I was thinking of.
Because like they paint Peter Dinklage's character.
That's not
like,
Peter Dinklage.
Or is it? Whatever.
There are more than one little people actors, Michael.
But you look like Peter Dinklage.
Oh my god!
Wait, what's his name? Oh, Jordan Prentice. Maybe. Anyway.
Yes, that is his name.
Is it?
Yes.
Anyway, he's both like painted as bad, and he has several sides to him as well, because he like comes up and like is generally friendly with them, but then like is on drugs, and like, you know, when he's on cocaine has all those racist speeches and stuff. But then they're like friendly with him right before the end again, and he like invites them to see the show. And anyway, I think it was part of the point was just to paint how people aren't black and white. Like everything. Yeah.
And also when at the end, the reason he gets killed is because he's kind of walking up to Colin Farrell because he's like worried about him because he sees him stumbling into the set and it's like, oh no, what's going on with this guy?
Yeah. So sad.
Yeah.
Such a sad movie.
Well, we needed you to be a metaphor for a dead child. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot that detail.
Half of his head missing.
So the last thing I'd want to talk about is because you said it was a sad movie, but for some reason, even though like movies depress me a lot, this movie didn't. I really liked the ending and found it kind of hopeful, actually, because he kind of says at the end that he doesn't want to die anymore. Like it seems like he has like a new appreciation for life and even for Bruges. And as he's like being put into the car, like all of the people who have sort of done nice things for him and care about him, like the girl he's dating and the owner of the inn and his friend just died for him and stuff. It kind of like makes it seem like stuff means things now.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I also think like one of the reasons why he didn't want to die is because he thought, what if hell is Bruges? And I think he specifically says that. So, I mean, I don't think he's like, I love Bruges now. It's just, I want to leave my purgatory. I want to try to go on. Which, I mean, that you're right. That is hopeful. You have a suicidal guy ridden by guilt who finds a way out of his depression, out of his suicidal tendencies to a place where hopefully he can make amends for the things he did and go on. But that took like 4 people dying for him to get there.
Right. Like objectively, it's sad, but this wasn't the kind of movie that I walked out of being like, oh, the world sucks.
Yeah, I don't think I walked out thinking it sucks, but I was. It's very melancholy, I think, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's the right word, because I think at the end, definitely the first time I saw it, I think I was just so like blown away by the artistry that was the level on which I was appreciating it. I was just like, my God, what did I just watch? You know, almost taken out of it by how good it was. And then on subsequent watches, you're more, you can attend to it more on different levels. I mean, I guess.
Perhaps it's just that like you want him to be okay, but kind of the moral of the movie, or the message of the movie, is that even if he does live, he does have to carry this with him, right? Like it's not like you can really be absolved of sin. That's definitely not the point of the movie. It's more like he will carry this with him, and he kind of has to move on, but still, nonetheless, all these things did happen.
I think Harry sums that up pretty succinctly when he says you can't kill a kid and expect to not be punished for it. He takes that to an extreme, obviously, but
I think it's really interesting that the movie, or I was going to say the movie opens up. That's not true, but what we learn about the backstory is that he murders this priest in confession, which is where you go to expunge yourself of your sins and get forgiveness.
Yeah, he literally asked for forgiveness for the murder he's about to commit.
Right.
Which works as this like clever dialogue twist, but also thematically very much fits. Yeah.
And he does not get that and he doesn't care at all about the fact that he murdered the priest, because it was like his job and he was okay with it.
Yeah. Well, the line is like, hey, you know what you signed up for when you became a priest. It's like, wait, what?
That's also one of the scenes they use in the trailer as like kind of like an action joke. It's like, haha, he kills the priests when they're in the confession booth. Yeah. Get it? How it's a thing.
Well, and then I think, and I can't remember, this might have been a deleted scene, but we learned that the priest didn't do anything to anyone. The priest was perfectly good. He just was in between developments of Harry's, and was like refusing to sell. So that's why they killed the priest.
I kind of like not knowing that.
That might have been a deleted scene. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, I think that was.
Okay. Well, sorry I ruined everything, Matt.
No.
I'm really sorry.
It's okay. I only go by the text.
Not canon.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else before we go? We didn't even really talk about how well directed this movie is. I think we touched on that long oneer with the phone conversation, but go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
Just gonna say, I think it's kind of self-evident. Like, it's not very much you have to explain about the directing.
It's really not overly flashy. You're right. I mean, it's kind of a very slow-paced movie. He uses a lot of handheld camera stuff, but also a lot of setup shots to kind of swoop over what Bruges looks like. We spend there's a lot of establishing shots looking at the architecture and the buildings, and that, like, the medieval nature of it, like, drives home this Old Testament kind of belief system even more. All the churches, all that stuff, like, it's very environmental, and I think the camera takes full advantage of that.
Yeah, and a huge amount of what's communicated is like a character looking down at a gun with a certain expression on their face, or a character glancing over at another character with a certain expression. And yeah, that's acting, but it's also the director has to have the wherewithal to point the camera at the actor at the right time to
right.
frame that.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And that's underappreciated. And how, like, this movie is so good with, like, the dialogue in this movie is so sharp and well written, but so much of what's going on is not communicated via dialogue at the same time. Yeah. And I think that juggling those two things, really fantastic.
Yeah, like half the dialogue in the movie is just like them talking about nonsense.
Right.
And, like, but it's like there's always a subtext to it, so it's always like very tightly communicated. Like, you can see Colin Farrell is chewed up inside, and it's very efficient.
Yeah. All right, Matt, do you need a final argument before we move on to the vote?
I don't think so. I if anything, I just kind of sat back and let you guys handle making my arguments for me today, and I think
it's a pretty easy one.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to the vote then. Let's make this thing official. Daniel, you go first.
Yes. Pass.
Why are you sighing as you say that?
No reason.
Michael.
Yeah, definitely pass. Objectively, the best movie of all time. We should probably create a special collection for it.
For just this one movie?
I'd be okay with that.
I actually traveled to Bruges just because this movie exists.
Oh, wow.
And traced out the whole... I watched the movie while in Bruges and then traced out the chase scene at the end.
Man, I did not know you loved this movie so much.
Why did you never tell me this?
I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay, fine.
I met some of our graduate school friends there.
Oh, yes, you did tell me this. You're right. I'm just...
But it was a very Bruges-like experience all around. I can tell you about some other time, but...
Yeah.
All right.
It's perfect.
All right. I vote yes as well. Obviously, this is a very, very good movie. I think this is on the list of movies we have in the collection so far. I would put this near the top of that list. I really, really enjoyed everything about this. I'm curious what you guys think of Seven Psychopaths, McDonagh's other feature film.
So
I think it was pretty good, but I'm having trouble remembering it, so it obviously wasn't as good.
Yeah, I it's embarrassing to admit I haven't seen that movie. I kind of forgot about it entirely. Like you mentioning it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was connected to this movie in some way.
I think you'd like it. It very much feels like Martin McDonagh. It's different, but very relatable. It has Colin Farrell in it again.
Yeah, there's something about these movies that's hard for the mind to hold on to, because when I was, I had to think of a movie for this episode, and I listed like 3 other movies that I was like, yeah, these are my 3 favorite movies, and then this movie came up in a completely unrelated context, and I was like, oh yeah, obviously In Bruges. Throw away those other 3 garbage movies.
And then I think this is well timed though, because McDonagh has another film coming out next month. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which is getting very good reviews at the film festivals it's been at so far. So maybe
this one does Peter Dinklage in it?
It does. This does have Peter Dinklage in it. So maybe that's where you got confused.
Yeah, we'll give you that one, Michael.
Give you that one.
Yeah, so maybe we'll have a quick update once we all see that film and talk about that one. I'm pretty excited for it. I was hoping to see it at Fantastic Fest, but it didn't happen. So I think I'm trying to find out when it actually comes out. It is November 10th, so it's coming up.
Wow, that's real close.
Yeah, soon.
All right, so that's all we got for the Kryptonian Collection. Congratulations, Matt. Your movie has made it in. Well deserved. Great pick. You kind of gamed the system a little bit by picking Michael's favorite movie and Daniel's favorite movie.
Well, I'm happy with this pick, though. I'm happy with this pick because I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like people don't know about this movie. I've definitely introduced more than one person to this movie for the first time, and successfully blown their mind with it, and had them be like, I had no idea, and I'm like, yeah, no one knows that this is so great.
Yeah. I will say that not enough people.
I definitely showed this to my grad school friend group, and like none of them had seen it, and all of them loved it. So, yes.
Yeah, and once again, I don't think this is a movie that you would find on the list of the best films ever, even if it should be on there. So I continue to like how our list is different, and it's all great films, but it's different, and I like that. So, good pick. I'm happy that it's in. Welcome to the Kryptonian Collection in Bruges.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap this thing up by very quickly just talking about what we've been watching. Since this is taking the place of a Daily Planet podcast episode this week, I still wanted to give everyone an opportunity to talk about what they have been seeing in the interim. So, Daniel, why don't you go first? What have you been watching?
Sure. So I think the last thing I saw was actually Blade Runner 2049, which was fantastic. And you guys did a fantastic podcast on it very recently.
Well, thank you.
I'm just going to shill that again.
So it's 3 versus 1. It's 3 versus 1, Michael.
Yeah, you can listen to how wrong Michael is about Blade Runner 2049.
I'm going to ask you again in 1 year whether you still like this movie.
I will probably have seen it 3 more times and still say yes.
Actually, what was funny about that podcast discussion is that on listening to it, we're all just kind of talking about how good it was for most of the running time of the podcast, with Michael having a few critical remarks thrown in. So.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's the kind of movie that sounds really good, and there's lots of things to appreciate about it when you're talking about it, but when you're watching it, it's just the worst.
I just can't disagree more. Yeah. I really can't.
Yeah, I know you said that,
but you're wrong. All right, Michael, what about you?
I went to go see Only the Brave Friday night.
Is that the firefighting movie?
About the Granite Mountain hot shots, some firefighters who died. Spoilers. No, it's based on a true story, so you pretty much have to know that before you go in. And I don't like movies that are based on true stories, but this one did it well because it wasn't like trying to, like, it was respectfully, like, had a lot of elements of truth in it, but its story was its own thing. They weren't trying to force like something into a story structure that didn't need to be there. And the best thing about this movie is the characters. It focuses on 3 of the firefighters. One of them is played by Miles Teller, who's awesome in it. Same guy from Whiplash, but is a completely different character here. Another one is played by Josh Brolin. He does a great job. Another one is played by Taylor Kitsch from Friday Night Lights, who also does a great job. But I would recommend it.
Yeah, that movie is out now. It just came out this past weekend. Directed by Joseph Kosinski, who also did Tron Legacy, not great, and Oblivion with Tom Cruise, which was okay.
Oh, yeah, that was okay.
Yeah, I'd go with not great.
Solid okay.
All right. Matt, how about you?
Well, we're just going to talk about this briefly, but I binged on the entirety of Rick and Morty over a fairly short span of time. I had not watched any of it at all, and I had been
telling
told
you for so long.
Yes, you've been telling me that. You and other people have actually been like, "Oh, these are your interests, Matt. You know what you would like based on all of those interests. You would like this show Rick and Morty because it's basically tailor-made for you and your exact preferences and who you are as a human being." And I said, yeah, I'll get around to it. And I finally did, and it was spoilers in terms of my opinion on it. It was everything that everyone said it would be. But we're going to talk about that in more depth next week, actually.
Yeah, we're going to do a whole Rick and Morty podcast next week.
100 years, Rick and Morty.
Okay. All right. So me last. I saw a movie that also came out this weekend. Michael and I both saw new releases this weekend. He picked the good one. I did not. I saw The Snowman, the Michael Fassbender serial killer movie based on the hugely popular and hugely famous Norwegian thriller novel. This was directed by Tomas Alfredson, who is actually a really good director. He did Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which I really liked. He did Let the Right One In, which was also a movie I really liked. So I had high expectations for this movie, and it is really bad, guys. It is awful. It's not supposed to be funny, and I busted out laughing 5 times in the theater in this serial killer movie. There's so many weird things going on here. The weirdest thing ever is Val Kilmer is in this movie. He plays a detective in Bergen, Norway, and they flash back to him several times. He's investigating the same crime that Michael Fassbender is investigating, but 9 years in the past. And I don't know, I've heard that he had cancer or something, so he couldn't speak. So they basically tried to cut around that by always showing him from behind whenever he's talking and using another actor that sounds nothing like Val Kilmer to dub his voice. It is the weirdest, most awkward thing in the world. It doesn't work at all. And the whole movie's like that. The whole movie's this weird, we talked about tone so much in this. The Snowman is a movie that is tonally a mess. It has no idea what it wants to be. It has no idea when it wants to be scary or shocking. It's just awful. I cannot believe how bad this movie is for how good everyone involved in it is. The book is supposed to be great, and I can see there's a kernel of this movie that I can see why this would make a good book, but they messed up everything. It's so bad.
Surprising.
Yeah.
Surprising considering the other movies that director has done.
I know.
Was that the original Let the Right One In or the remake?
The original.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought they changed it. Didn't they change the name when they remade it for the States? I thought they changed it to Let Me In.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Stupid.
Is that true? I don't remember that being true, but maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's definitely the original, though, because it's the Swedish one, not the American one. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so that's The Snowman. Do not go see that. See Only the Brave instead. I never thought that I would go to a movie the week that Geostorm came out, and the movie I saw be worse than Geostorm, but The Snowman, from everything I've read about Geostorm, The Snowman is worse. It's real bad. All right.
Just to be fair, Geostorm is probably terrible.
Oh, I'm sure it's awful. Geostorm was filmed 3 years ago, and they tried to fix it many times. And Geostorm cost $120 million to make. It made $13 million this weekend. So, ouch. All right. So that's all we have for you this month, guys. In November, Matt and Michael and I will once again reconvene the council to hear arguments from a new challenger. No idea who that's going to be yet, but be sure to check out the Daily Planet Twitter at Daily Planet Films, because as soon as we have a challenger and a movie, we will announce that so you guys can watch that in advance of the episode. Next week, as Matt mentioned, we will return to our regularly scheduled Daily Planet podcast schedule, and Matt and I will be discussing season 3 and all of Rick and Morty.
That's right. You can find all the other podcasts we do over at dailyplanetfilms.com. This week, we've got another episode of We've Got Worm covering Arc 25 of the web serial Worm, as well as a new episode of my show with Michael, So-Called Writers. Those episodes will come out Wednesday and Thursday, respectively.
Yeah, and if you like what we do here and want to see more of it, head on over to patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. We really appreciate all your continued support out there. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you as we continue to move forward and expand and try new shows and new things and bring back old things. It's all very, very, very exciting. So thanks for all your support, everyone out there. And I guess that's all we have, Matt. Matt, you did it. You can resume your seat on the council again. Daniel, thanks.
I'm just gonna pick like Mortal Kombat 2 or something next time I'm on, just to make you watch it.
No, Daniel, at least pick Mortal Kombat 1. Don't make me watch Mortal Kombat 2.
Yeah. I mean, you still won't get in, but it'll be fun. No, but thank you for coming on and taking that honorary seat again.
Of course, always happy to be here.
All right. And Michael, well done.
Yeah.
You got you because of this special episode 10, you retain your seat for another week or another month. That is
all according to plan.
And then you're going to vote no for everything else in hopes to stay in your seat forever.
We'll see what is suggested.
But see, the system is designed to make it so you can't do that. It's a perfect system with no flaws at all, right, Daniel?
No flaws.
No, none whatsoever.
All right, that's all we have this week, guys. Thank you again, and we will see you all next week.
This discussion is terminated. The decision of the Council is final.